Ancient Rome is one of the most important civilizations in history. You have probably heard about it, and you may know that it fell in for 76 AD, when the Germanic leader Barbarossa deposed Romulus Augustus and took control of Italy. But that date is misleading. Rome didn't fall overnight. It was a long process that spanned almost 2 centuries with many contributing factors. Rome was one of the longest-lasting civilizations in history. After the fall of its successor, the Byzantine Empire, Western civilization entered the Middle Ages. This was a period of intellectual darkness that lasted from the 5th to the 15th century. That means that for almost 1,000 years, Europe was without any memory of the achievements of ancient Greece and Rome. Today we are going to look at the rise and fall of this great empire, so that you can better understand what made it so successful in the first place, and how it failed to survive into the modern age. If you enjoy this video and want to learn more about ancient history, stay tuned for more content. Let's jump in. Rome was founded in the 8th century BC on the Italian peninsula. It was originally a small city-state ruled by kings. However, it gradually grew in power and eventually conquered all of Italy. This was known as the Roman Republic. It was a representative democracy, which was unique in the ancient world. At first, the Roman Republic was constantly at war with neighboring powers such as Carthage. But in the mid-2nd century BC, Rome had become the dominant power in the Mediterranean. By this point, there were 3 main factors that made Rome successful. Firstly, its military. The Romans were excellent soldiers, and they developed new technologies such as roads and aqueducts that gave them an advantage over their enemies. Secondly, its economy. The Romans controlled much of the Mediterranean Sea, which allowed them to trade with other civilizations. They also exploited their provinces for resources, which helped them to build impressive public works, such as temples and aqueducts. And thirdly, its society. The Romans were very adaptable, and they were able to absorb new ideas and technologies from other cultures. For example, they adopted the Greek alphabet, and they also studied Greek philosophy. However, these same factors would later contribute to the downfall of the empire. Firstly, the military. The Roman army was huge, and it needed to be fed and equipped. This required a lot of money, which led to high taxes. The soldiers also spent long periods away from home, which created a sense of bitterness among the lower ranks. Eventually, the army became a tool of the emperors, and they used it to maintain control over the provinces. This created a divide between the rich, who benefited from the empire, and the poor, who had to fight in the army. Secondly, the economy. As the empire expanded, it became more difficult to manage. The provinces were too far away to be effectively controlled, so the emperors appointed governors to rule in their place. This created a system of corruption, as the governors exploited their position for personal gain. Also, the provinces rebelled against the oppressive rule of Rome. And thirdly, the society. As the empire grew, it became more diverse, and the different cultures within the empire began to clash. There was also a decline in civic virtue, as the Romans became more interested in luxury and pleasure. This created social unrest, which the emperors used the army to put down. In 27 BC, Octavian, who was later known as Augustus, became the first emperor of Rome. Under his rule, the empire reached its greatest extent and enjoyed a period of peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana. But after his death, the empire was plunged into a civil war. This resulted in the establishment of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, followed by the Flavian dynasty, and then the Antonine dynasty. During this time, Rome experienced a series of crises, including the destruction of much of the city by fire and earthquake. The Antonine Plague, which killed millions of people, and attacks from outside invaders, such as the Goths and the Marcomanns. Despite these challenges, the empire survived and continued to thrive. In the 3rd century, the empire faced another crisis. The Severan dynasty was unable to cope with the increasing demands of the provinces, and the empire was on the verge of collapse. However, Diocletian came to power, and he implemented a number of reforms that stabilized the empire. He divided the empire into 2 halves, the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire, and he also introduced a new currency and a new system of taxation. He was succeeded by Constantine the Great, who converted to Christianity and made it the official religion of the empire. After Constantine, the empire entered a period of decline. The Western Roman Empire was increasingly being attacked by outside invaders such as the Goths and the Vandals. In 410, the Goths sacked Rome, which was a humiliating experience for the Romans. The last emperor of the Western Roman Empire was Romulus Augustus. He was deposed by the Germanic leader Odoacer in 476. However, it's important to note that the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, continued to survive for another 1,000 years until it was conquered by the Ottoman Turks in 1453. There are several reasons why Rome fell. Firstly, the empire was just too big to effectively control. As it expanded, the provinces were too far away to be effectively governed, and the emperors had to appoint officials to rule in their place. This created a system of corruption, as the officials exploited their position for personal gain. The distance also made it difficult to defend the borders, so the empire was vulnerable to attack from outside invaders. Secondly, Rome was suffering from economic problems. The empire was heavily in debt, and the provinces were exploited for their resources. This led to revolts in the provinces, which weakened the empire. Thirdly, Rome had a weak military. The army was overstretched and underpaid, so morale was low. This meant that the empire was unable to defend itself against the invaders. Fourthly, Rome had a succession crisis. When an emperor died, there was often a struggle to replace him. This created instability and civil war, which weakened the empire. Fifthly, Rome was suffering from social problems. There was a growing gap between the rich and the poor, and there was a decline in civic virtue. This led to civil unrest, which the emperors used the army to put down. Finally, the rise of Christianity also contributed to the fall of Rome. As Christianity spread throughout the empire, it undermined traditional Roman values and institutions. This created a sense of moral decay, which made it difficult for Rome to defend itself against external threats. However, it's important to note that Rome didn't fall overnight. It was a slow process that spanned almost 2 centuries. The Western Roman Empire had been in decline for a long time, before it finally collapsed in 476. So there you have it, a brief overview of the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, that's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, please stay tuned for more content, and I'll catch you next time.